All right. Welcome to Utah Stories. So I found some alarming statistics, not alarming in the way you would expect, but in the way you would not expect, that crime and drug crime has gone down in Salt Lake City. I heard that from a short interview I had with, I should just say conversation I had with Sim Gill. I ran into him in a restaurant. I'd been trying to get a hold of his office regarding a violent man who's on the streets, who's accosting other homeless people, hit three homeless people in the head with a hammer, and has just been never put in prison, never been committed to a psychiatric facility. And I was witnessing the police vehicles going around the city from homeless incident to homeless incident to homeless incident, and then more and more people smoking crack pipes. You just see it right out in the open. Fentanyl, you can smell it everywhere. But drug crimes have gone down by 60%. And I told Rocky about this earlier today, and I said, you want to come on the program today to talk about it, total short notice? And he said, yes, let's talk about it. So thanks so much for coming on, Rocky.
Absolutely. I think these are among the most serious issues we can talk about, because if we don't feel safe and secure in our community, and we're not, and especially if the police are not, serving and protecting everybody, including the homeless community, then the people at the top are not doing their jobs. And I guarantee they are not doing their jobs, and they're also misleading the hell out of the people of Salt Lake City.
Yeah, and so my main question is how come our eyes and our ears are deceiving us so much? How come we see the crime, we see the drugs, we can taste, you can taste it walking down the street, but it's gone down by 60%. Why is that?
Well, the latest CompStat report of the police department actually shows an increase compared to the 5-year average. But how do they arrive at the 5-year average? You look at the entire year, last year,
this is the
22.
Report. Let me flip the camera here so I can show this. Sorry for those who are experiencing the delay. I just want you to see
number
this.
52, volume 8.
I'll try to just show it like this.
Okay.
So down in the corner.
So look at this.
Is.
Drugs. Right up here, Rio Grande data. So this is a Rio Grande area where if you drive by right now, if you drove by a year ago,
drug trafficking
people are shooting up, people are smoking meth, you got crack pipes, you can go, it is rampant. It's an open air drug market, basically. People on the street passed out. 58.9% decrease for all of 2022 on the CompStats. You cannot believe what these CompStats say. The police crime reports, last, I believe it was October, the police chief and the mayor did a big press conference. They were waving around this report, and they said, we've got this new strategy. We're actually going to send police where the criminals are, which I think the Lone Ranger figured out. But anyway, I don't know why that was.
I think they called them hot spots, right?
Yeah,
we're going to focus on the hot spots.
Yeah, there's nothing new about that. We're all doing that.
They acted like they invented it
many years ago. Anyway, they had this big expensive report that they paid all these PhDs from San Antonio to do. But they're waving that around and talking about, look at these areas. And so they cherry-picked the data. They said, look at these 4 square block areas, 2 blocks by 2 blocks. And they picked 3 of them, and they said, this August compared to last August, these reductions in crime. And so the Tribune, they've got deadlines. I understand that. And so they go with what they were told. They believe the mayor and the chief. And they, in the sub-headline, talked about the decrease in crime. Well, I went to the report that they were waving around, and right there in the executive summary, it says, well, if you look at a shorter period of time, you can show some decreases. It depends on the data that you look at and the time periods. But they said you look over a longer period of time, over the past 2 years, violent crime has increased about 20% in Salt Lake City. That was in their very report, and in front of that executive summary, it showed that it was co-authored by Chief Mike Brown. So that's the kind of that's the kind of deception that we're getting.
And it's just,
but it goes deeper than that. If you don't mind.
Yeah, go ahead.
You also are manipulating the data when you don't respond to crime. My friend, you've had him on your program, David E. Barrett. He had a knife pulled on him when he caught a guy breaking into his car, stealing his property. 3 crimes now. The most serious, assault with a deadly weapon. David got him down on the ground, had somebody from his office call 911. 28 minutes later, he's holding this guy down.
Yeah.
This guy's 3 friends came up from the convenience store, been hanging around, yelling at David, saying, MFer, you can't touch us, which tells you a lot about the attitude people have about the impunity and the uselessness of calling police, because nothing ever happens. And David had this guy down for 28 minutes and finally let him up because no police ever showed up.
God,
now,
crazy.
when no police show up, there's no crime. It's not going to show up in your data. Channel 13 did a killer expose on response times, over an hour to show up after a man called and said this elderly woman was being beaten, and you could hear her screaming in the background on the 911 call. It was over an hour, so by the time the police got there, there was no victim, no offender. The witness was there, but there wasn't anybody there, so it doesn't get on your crime statistics because it mustn't have never happened if it's not. If the police
so my
get there
question
an hour
is,
later.
like, this is ultimate gaslighting. They're trying to say, oh no, it's perfectly good down here. It's just fine, and we're solving the problem. And so, do you think that this is a coordinated effort to have Mendenhall reelected? That they're somehow working together?
You know, I never attribute motives unless I know it, unless I hear it.
Yeah, that's smart.
But
policy.
I sure know what the evidence is, and that is, you talk to Randy Topham at Cake Salon at 1010 South State Street. All the crime that he's faced there. Mm-hmm. He says the police show up maybe half the time that he calls. They never make an arrest. One time they made an arrest, but it was for a different offense. They were looking for this person. Other than that, he says they never will do anything about it, and they tell him, they take him to the side and say, listen, the mayor has told us just to tell them to move on. Mm-hmm. Teresa Bowman, the owner of Mid-City Salon.
That statement you just
South,
said, the mayor has told us to tell them to move on. I've interviewed multiple business owners who say that exact same phrase.
Yep,
Teresa. The mayor has told us to tell them, please move on. Oh, you just broke my window and ruined my sign. You just caused $5,000 in damage. Oh, please move on. Don't call the cops. Just move on.
Yep. So what does that tell these people? Like Randy will say, it tells them, you're doing just great. Keep doing what you're doing, because there are never any consequences. And by the way, I'm not looking to have people, especially if they're mentally ill or drug addicted, face a lot of punishment or retribution. I'm looking for them to be brought into the system and get some help. Yeah. If they need mental health treatment, get them into mental health. If they need drug addiction treatment, you're never going to get them into drug court and be encouraged in a strong way to get drug rehabilitation if they're not brought into the system. But as long as you turn a blind eye, you wouldn't do that for somebody in your family, would you? Why do we do this? Yeah. We keep hearing people say these are our homeless brothers and sisters. Well, we don't treat them like that. No. When they're suffering from these problems and they're committing antisocial acts, and some of them might just be antisocial, but there needs to be a response, and the rest of us deserve compassion too. Teresa Bowman, the owner of Mid-City Salon on 3rd South between Main Street and West Temple. She's had it all. Feces smeared on her windows, three masturbators, one of them in front of her daughter. The last time, that one By the way, an officer did show up. He talked to the guy who had been masturbating. The guy pushed the officer, assaulted the officer. Teresa looks at him and says, "You're not going to do something about that? If I pushed you, you would arrest me. You would take me in and get me booked." And he said, "Yeah, but the mayor's told us just to tell them to move along." The last time Teresa called the police, all women customers, all women employees, it's solid glass windows looking onto 3rd South. This guy comes up, drops his pants, masturbates in front of all of them. They're terrified.
This is Cake Salon?
No, that
Or
one is Mid-City Salon.
Mid-City Salon. Huh.
He masturbates in front of them. They call the police. They're freaked out. The police, in over 2 hours, never came.
No
They
way.
finally closed the next day. She was so outraged. She called the police. She called the mayor's office. And she's told once again by the police, even if we came, we would just tell them to move along. So we increased the police budget this year. The mayor and the council, increased the police budget by 25% in 1 year. That's absolutely unprecedented.
Yeah.
It is outrageous.
Well, the reason why I wanted to talk to you about this especially is the biggest question I've had for months now, one of the two biggest questions, is why in the world would a man who goes around hitting homeless people with hammers, I mean, he's done it several times, and I pull up his rap sheet. It's like 7 years of hurting people, accosting people, smashing his cart into people. He assaulted an officer. Why is this guy walking the streets? Why is he not in prison? And after this incident where he hit people in the head, I arrived on the scene. I was just down there filming. 3 people had bloody heads, blood streaming down their heads. They were all homeless people. And then I check out this guy's rap sheet, and it's just like extremely long. And I'm like, why isn't he in prison? And I wanted to ask Sim Gill that question.
Let me tell you.
And I finally got an answer, though. So Sim told me that if somebody is mentally incompetent to stand trial, even if they've got the bench warrant and they've been trying to get a hold of this person, they're not going to stand a trial for a conviction that's going to get locked up in prison. And I'm like, but then don't you commit them, or don't?
Of course
isn't
you
there
do.
some place you put? And he says it's we don't have any place for these people.
Oh, that's absolutely untrue. If you can pink sheet somebody, if you can show that they pose an imminent risk of danger to themselves or other people, and this guy obviously does.
And that's not like
you get them mental health treatment. You get them committed, and that is such a failing on the part of our government, city and county. And so, if this were a lawyer
and the
or
people,
a doctor,
the people going out messing up these businesses, masturbating in front of their window. Another business owner said it was the second time her window had been, her giant window, plate glass window in front of her store had been smashed out. She doesn't want to go on the record. She doesn't want to even say her name because she's afraid she won't be in the mayor's fold, and she's afraid that she's going to then be treated with hostility by the police and the mayor.
Well, then
it just
I'm sorry. Then she's complicit because we all have to speak up, and it's time that we all take the attitude. The mayor, her staff, the police, they work for us, and we deserve to have our property safe. We deserve to be able to move around in our communities and work and play and use our parks with safety and security. You can't go to the parks now without there being encampments. What is that? Mm-hmm. That's solely a function of the fact that our mayor has failed to provide adequate shelter. And she was on the city council when they allowed just the 3 scattered sites, the shelters, which it was an obscene, ridiculous solution. It wasn't a solution at all. It wasn't based on any evidence. There wasn't a model program that you can say, oh yeah, let's spread it around.
Yeah.
Well, what happens is these people are driven by politics, and it includes council members like Mayor Mendenhall, when they say, oh, we don't want too many of them in our district, so let's move them around. Let's put one over here and have 200 people and one over here. And they ended up with 400 fewer beds than what they had.
I've been looking at that, and I'm going to do a segment on it later. But it's very strange how that was the ideal place for a shelter. Was the shelter mismanaged? Was it terrible? Was it full of crime? Absolutely. But then you look at that location right across from St. Vincent's, right across from the Weigland Center, close to the 4th Street Clinic. I mean, that was a great place to have a giant shelter if your interest was in the homeless population and putting them under a roof, and so they don't die. But so to demolish that shelter, we're left with these 4 resource centers, and like you said, 400 fewer beds.
3 resource centers.
3 resource centers, and people can't take their pets in. People can't stay together. I
heard the other day that you can't take your pets in, so I'm not sure if that's an urban myth or not.
I think that they find
but you can't go
kennels,
in as couples.
Yeah, maybe they find a kennel somewhere where they can put them. But my point is, like, whose decision was that, and why couldn't they just clean out the shelter that was there or rebuild it? I mean, it just doesn't make any sense.
Politically coward council members, and then a mayor who got caught in all of this, because the decision was to gentrify that area, let the developers come in, get rid of the road home, and then scatter them. And
now a developer from Chicago,
all over
Hamilton
the place.
Owns it.
Yeah, but if you're going to do that, move the entire campus. That's what we need to do.
Yeah.
And in my view, we ought to take a place like Wing Point, the old golf course out by the airport, have one campus where you've got all the nonprofits, and the model for this is Haven for Hope in San Antonio. You have the mental health services and a holding place. If you arrest somebody on drug charges, don't take them into the jail. That's the most expensive housing on the planet anyway. Take them where they're going to get some help. The last big case I handled was for a woman who got picked up for heroin. She started on heroin because she got hooked on opioids, prescription opioids for the treatment of her Crohn's disease. They take her in. She ends up dying of peritonitis, a horribly painful, long, drawn-out death because they blew her off thinking that all the pain that she was screaming about was from withdrawal from drugs. And the culture in the jail is really so disparaging toward anybody who's got those kinds of problems. But even if it weren't for those dangers in our jails, we ought to be taking
just move the whole campus out to north, nearby the airport, somewhere where all the resources are.
So you could have transitional housing, you could have job training and placement, you could have the outreach workers, and that's so fundamentally important that you have a one-on-one relationship with every single person there, that there be outreach workers and case management workers that are assigned to every single person to help transition them. There are people that have been living in these so-called shelters or so-called resource centers for 2 years or more.
Yeah.
They're not transitioning them out. They're not getting into transitional or permanent housing or jobs. Nobody's improving their lives, and there's still drugs. There's still prostitution going on.
It's like the wraparound services just don't exist. That was supposed to be the key component. We're supposed to get them into jobs or get them into rehab or get them into psychiatric care. And you look at the facility, outside of it, people are ranting. People are obviously mentally ill everywhere around there, and it just seems like the biggest gap in the system is mental health. There's mentally ill people roaming the streets. In that same conversation I had with Sim Gill, he said that the reason why about 30, I guess it's about 30 people from Salt Lake City went to Miami Beach, Florida in the middle of winter was to examine their mental health model, because they had figured out how to get mentally ill people off the streets, which are the problem for everybody. And I guess they had to go enjoy the beach in the middle.
You have to go to Miami, Florida to figure that out. That's just astounding.
They gave a press conference. I started watching it. It was hilarious. They all each got up and said, yes, we learned a lot from Miami Beach, Florida. We really did. And one after another, they got up and said that, and including people in the county, and it was just this big group of people. But they're all kind of in this fold together. And I guess it was Sim Gill's idea to go out there and check it out. But that is the missing piece, don't you think, that we don't have enough beds in a mental institution for these extremely difficult psychiatric patients?
But that I think that's an empty excuse, because for somebody that's going around with a hammer, there are beds. There are solutions for that. That's just a total cop-out. And I love Sim, and he was a great city prosecutor. I appointed him as city prosecutor. We put in place the country's most comprehensive restorative justice programs at the time. But in my view, if I'm mayor, I'm going to bring the responsibilities of the city prosecutor back to the city. The prosecutor is going to work in my administration. We're going to put back that restorative justice program, but there's going to be accountability for every violation of the law.
When you say restorative justice, to me that sounds like soft on crime.
It's not soft on crime at all. Restore means you restore
put them in jail?
You restore the victims as well. It's about taking full accountability, paying restitution, that you restore the taxpayers as well. You restore government. But it's not about punishment and retribution. It's about making things right and solving problems. So if you did this because you're addicted to drugs, then you're going to go into drug treatment. If it's because you've got a mental health problem, you get them into mental health treatment. But the county, and under the county mayor, she's, I think, done a dismal job on this all the years that she's been there, to not have every single person, you and I and everybody else, should know of a number that we can call when somebody suffering from schizophrenia or something else is coming up and screaming and being hostile to us on the street when we're sitting at a restaurant. And this has happened to me. I saw it happen to a couple from out of town. They were sitting there at Current, and this guy got off his bike and came over and screaming at him and became assaultive. I had to get in the middle of it and try to divert the guy's attention. I got him to move on. Then I found out he'd turned the corner on his bike and attacked a man walking with a cane. Jeez. Now, that's not the kind of city we should have. We shouldn't be worried about that every time we go downtown. The last time I went down was probably 3 weeks ago to a restaurant on Main Street, just past 3rd South. I had to walk over bodies that were laid out, some of them unconscious, on the sidewalk in Salt Lake City on our main street. I've had it.
And it's like the last few times I've gone to Main Street, the same guy is screaming at the top of his lungs, and his voice is echoing off the buildings. You can see everybody's kind of freaked out, but he's there like every afternoon. And it's kind of a common occurrence now. You walk north of like 200 South toward the temple, and it's like that guy's there, and I feel bad for the guy. He's not hurting anybody, and I know a business owner who knows him pretty well, but he just goes like raving lunatic in the afternoon, and so you just right now I guess we just supposed to deal with that, just like live with it.
Well, that
until
happens,
they come up with a better solution.
But a solution in California is that you, with certain kinds of symptoms, you can get somebody appointed guardian and get the person in for treatment. Because, I mean, how sad is it that there are people who could be living good lives, rewarding lives, if they only had the right treatment and medication.
Yeah.
There was a man, he had a mental illness out in front of my law office on 3rd South in Maine. I took him under my wing. He'd sleep on that sidewalk through the most bitter cold nights, through sweltering summers. I gained his trust. I'd buy him a Jimmy John's almost every day. So number 6, he would never vary from a number 6. When he was really filthy a couple of times, I took him up and let him use my shower, and I laundered his clothes for him. But over time, he knew he could trust me, and I got him into an apartment. And it's not going to happen overnight. He did keep coming back and would be begging, and those same old patterns. But they're years-long patterns. But it didn't take him very long to start getting used to being in a place. He is thriving now because he's got a home, he's got services, he's got things taken care of. He's on Social Security disability, which he should have been on all along. Yeah. But one of my complaints to the mayor, and I was writing to her and a council member about it at the time, is where are your outreach workers? Why are these people out on the streets in this condition?
I think they're afraid of them. I see the outreach workers.
Which outreach workers?
The ambassadors.
They're not outreach workers. That is the biggest fraud. And this mayor will say,
what are those people?
they walk around and they can tell people, I guess, directions. They do not provide outreach. Outreach is where you establish a relationship, you plant the seed, and you help transition people toward a better life.
Yeah.
And get them with a case manager.
What's missing.
To say that these downtown ambassadors are doing, hell, they can't even hand out water in the summer now. They're forbidden from handing out anything to the homeless. So no, So I saw all these people. I saw so much, and all of us have seen examples of this, but I was seeing it every single day. Writing to the mayor, I said, and along with this, because you won't put out any public toilets, which is a violation of international human rights law, you won't even put out toilets. There's no sanitation. Yeah. So we have human feces around our building, throughout our downtown, in certain neighborhoods. I mean, you go out in Ballpark District, they go into people's yards.
It's like we're losing the city, and I really hope the people watching can share this with a friend, because the problem is I don't believe that the newspapers are covering this issue in the way it needs to be covered. No. They're not telling the truth. The only story I've seen recently that compares you to Aaron Mendenhall was just comparing money. And it's like money that you've gotten from your campaign. It's not comparing you on the issues. It's not connecting the dots between the homeless problem and the mayor's office. That those dots are just not being connected in the newspapers. Yeah. And it's like, as you said when we started this program, the mayor is the tip of the spear when it comes to homeless policy. The state is giving all this money, and they're giving it to all these NGOs and organizations, but the mayor is the person who is supposed to direct the policy of what's happening. So she tries to say it's not her problem, it's not her fault, she didn't do this, it's gotten out of control. Maybe she's kind of starting to admit that, but she's not taking any of the blame.
Then she shouldn't run for mayor, because around the world, there's this really great book, How 10 Global Cities Take on Homelessness, Innovations That Work. And it stresses here that it's always the mayor. You look at Los Angeles. Do you hear the Los Angeles mayor saying, "Oh, it's not my problem. It's for the state to handle"? Do you hear that up in Seattle? It's always the mayor, the Denver mayor. Mm-hmm. It's the mayors that step up and convene the parties, figure out where they can get the resources. It doesn't mean that you don't work with other people. Our mayor, it took her going to Miami to figure out that, we're supposed to collaborate. Wasn't that an amazing admission? Mm-hmm. I about fell over when I saw that she'd said that. It's like, really? Yeah. You didn't know that you were supposed to work with everybody to make sure that we had adequate shelter and housing? But this book says that, and it goes on about the mayor's responsibilities, but it points out an effective solution demands that local actions among multiple agencies, government and non-governmental, be coordinated, something mayors are uniquely positioned to do. And they say here, in each of the 10 cities discussed in this book, mayors step forward to define the problem and craft the solution. Some mayors, however, refuse or prove inadequate to the task. And that's exactly the situation we have now. Now, I've put together in writing by time stages, immediate steps we need to take, steps we should take within 2 or 3 months, steps that we should take within a year, within 2 years, and ongoing. Mm-hmm. And the ultimate is to work toward the creation of a campus where it's on the outskirts, it's not destroying neighborhoods, established neighborhoods, it's not undermining businesses, but that we have a campus with all the nonprofits, with mm-hmm. the transitional housing, and then you also would have a secured area for the no-barrier people who say, I don't want to stop drugs right now. I'm not ready for transitional housing. I just want to live in my tent. Well, you provide enough, like showers, like 3 meals a day, like a mail drop, like property lockers, like they do at the courtyard at Haven for Hope in San Antonio. Mm-hmm. People, you can entice them away. They've reduced encampments by over 85%.
Can you pull that up,
San Antonio?
MJ, the Haven for Hope website. There's one thing I want to point out on their website that I found really interesting.
Yeah, they've got actually a virtual tour, and I really encourage people look at it.
It was just like tour. So one of the biggest problems I keep hearing about in Salt Lake City Homeless Services is you have all the silos, and the silos are overlapping a lot of times, and people are working with caseworkers from VOA, and then they're working from a caseworker from Road Home, and then they've got they're just overlapping services that rather than all the service providers working together. When you go down, I think scroll down a little farther, you see all the nonprofits that work together at Haven for Hope. Oh, yeah. They all work together. They're all under the same umbrella. There they are. Yep. So there's 130 nonprofits working together to solve the problem together. Rather than working separately in their own different silos, they're working together. And then why don't we do that?
Right. And they have one first-rate healthcare facility. In fact, neighbors to Haven for Hope on the outside bring their kids there because it's such excellent child care. They have,
and it's a nice place. Like you look at it, it's like you look outside of our resource centers. They're just derelict and they're just decrepit, and there's people doing all sorts of crazy things. Oh, you got to go. But anyway, the point is, I think you're right. We got to get all these entities, the district attorney's office, all the nonprofits, the mayor's office, and the mayor has to be the person to orchestrate that. It's a humongous task, obviously. Yeah. But
we need somebody. I'm running because I will embrace that responsibility. I'm never going to run away from it. I'm going to say absolutely, and I'll be able to work. I've already talked to the President of the Senate, Stuart Adams, about this. We know that we can work together to help solve these problems. I know I can work with anybody in the nonprofit sector. I've worked very closely with Carol at SwitchPoint. Mm-hmm. I've gotten so far 9 people that I've met in camps in permanent housing at SwitchPoint.
That's great.
And 4 of them, by the way, are amputees because they lost fingers, toes, or in one case, bottom part of his legs, including, of course, his feet, because they froze in the bitter winter because the mayor did not. She refused to provide adequate shelter for all of these human beings that lived in total misery this last winter, and it cost several people their lives.
Yeah, it was horrible.
And I've said it before, we hit a moral low point for our city, and it's a shame that it wasn't covered more by the newspapers and TV news. People need to see the images. I've got a lot of them if you want to see, like the raids on the homeless people.
It was absolutely. I was just shocked that we were living in Salt Lake City last winter in the middle of the NBA, but right before the NBA All-Star weekend, moving them all to that one area on the island, and then constant harassment by the police while they're trying to survive. And so we're working on a documentary film project right now. We're going to show what it was like last winter. we have footage that you took in somebody disassembling their camp during the middle of winter. We want to show more of that. We've gotten in contact with now 2 families that lost family members during last winter. It's extremely sad, but I think we need to address it. We need to tell the truth about it. We got to stop covering it up. I've tried to get the death count, the official death count from the police through a grandma request, the Freedom of Information Act request, and they're actually stonewalling me. They've been stonewalling me for 9 months.
Isn't that amazing? The public does not know how many people. We know that 5 died, and that led to the mayor doing that highly publicized emergency proclamation, allowing the 2 resource centers within the city to expand their capacity by 25 each. Do you know that they never expanded their capacity? That
never happened.
Emergency proclamation where she was going out taking such decisive action, they never added a bed.
Yeah. It's all just
parading,
performing, smoke and mirrors, gaslighting, and I just think the truth needs to come out. We want to tell the truth at Utah Stories. So if people become subscribers to the magazine, our brand new issue is out, or go and become a member, we'll send you a ticket to the premiere. I've invited Rocky to sit on a panel before we show the film. My hope is to have Joseph Grenny and Carol Hollowell also there with hopefully David Droscher. But you guys are part of the solution, and I think the biggest problem is like the problem isn't that we don't have the solution, we don't know what to do. The problem is the money is going in the wrong places.
Absolutely.
The money needs to be redirected to the people who actually have the solutions.
And there need to be metrics of success, and they need to be publicly reported. Why isn't it amazing? All these millions in public money, and the people that are operating these facilities, the shelters, permanent housing like Magnolia, we don't have any metrics of success where they can be measured and be held accountable to the public.
All we know is that every year they need more money because there's more homeless people. And Scott Howe was on the program talking about that. It's like, oh, well, last year we gave you $5 million, but this year you're asking for $10 million. Why is that? Well, because instead of having 100 homeless people, we have 200. So every year they keep doubling up the budget because there's more homeless people. Why can't the metric be how many homeless people did you get off the street with the $10 million we gave you? It's just totally asinine how they measure it.
The litmus test is just look around.
Yeah.
And people,
actually
we all
use
need
your
to
eyes,
ask ourselves.
and you're going to know the crime did not go down. They're just not putting
What are you
going to
believe? Our statistics or your lying eyes, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know where that comes from, but it's a good line. And that's absolutely the case. I've seen people shooting up heroin right in the middle of the street, right in front of the building where our law office was. I called the police. They never even showed. And I don't blame any particular officers. I feel bad for them because I think they went into policing.
No, they're just doing their jobs. They're doing what
to
they're
serve
told.
and protect.
I don't blame
but they're
the
not
officers.
doing what their real job is, and that is to serve and protect all of us. Mm-hmm. And that includes the homeless community, but it also means that the public ought to be able to use our parks, our public places, and they're going unregulated.
Yeah.
And that's because of the mayor. They just had this public meeting the other day at the City and County building. I went to it. They said it was for a conversation. It was one of the council members. It was the mayor, some of her staff, and a police officer. There was no conversation. They took written questions. They did all the talking, and then it was over with. We're all looking at each other like, really, all we just heard was excuses. Like, well, we wish we could tell you that we're going to get rid of these encampments, but it's not going to happen.
Really?
Well, we need to elect new people then.
Yeah.
And let me tell you, that's why I'm running for mayor. That's why I decided the thought never crossed my mind since the year 2008, which was the last year that I served as mayor.
Well, I'm glad you're stepping up. Go visit rockyformayor.com, get more information. Go check out the CompStat report. I mean, I think the point is everybody's got to do their own digging because I don't feel like the media is stepping up. Go look around Salt Lake City. Do you like what we see? If you do, fine, but if you don't, let's change things. So thanks for watching, everybody. We've got one little last report we're going to do in a few minutes. It's just showing 2 more homeless interviews we did over the last 2 weeks, MJ and I. It's a guy named Peoples who barely survived last winter. We talked to him in Pioneer Park. And then a woman named Crystal, and she's a single parent mom with 3 kids. She's going to talk about what would help her to be able to get off the streets. That's going to be our last segment, and then we'll wrap it up. But thank you so much for watching. Thanks for coming on, Rocky.
Thanks, Richard.
Appreciate it.
Take care.